Welcome back to another series of jPlay. Despite my announcement during the last playthrough of Merchant and Marauders, I think I'm not going to do Talisman today. I would rather go for another cool game by Stefan Feld, and as you can see, this would be Tryon. It's basically also a worker placement game, very heavy Euro style game, of course loads of victory points to gain, resources to control. You have to maintain or control the provinces, you can build your house, really very many opportunities and options that the game offers here. And I'm really looking forward to play this one more time. I have to admit I have not played this game too often, so I think it was only maybe 2 or 3 times in the past, and it's also some time back. So I try to find some excuses in advance if I do any mistakes or so. So please be nice, and yeah, hope you looking forward to my playthrough here as well. One more time I will dive into the material here a little bit, but I think I will not do a classic unboxing. I think I would rather go for a complete setup of the board and then explain the components as they are being put on the board, and yeah, as you can see them here. Then let me go through very quickly to some of the basic rules of this game, but not into deep. I think this more or less does not really help because it's a relatively complex game. And I think, as usual, I explain the rules as I go. I think I will play the game with only 2 players. This also plays relatively nice with 2 players, so like Castles of Burgundy, it's also a good game for playing with only 2 players. And yeah, let's get started. Let's have a look inside the box, and yeah, then I think we can go on with the gameplay. So, this is the starting setup for Tryon. Let me pan a little bit that you can see that what's everything inside the box. Of course I will show all the components right now or in a second individually. So here you see, again, it would not be a Stefan Feld game if there wouldn't be a personal player board. So let me just go there a little bit closer to that one. So this would be the player board for the red player in this case. I already prepared everything, and everything I did was really pure at random, so I did no real thorough planning for everything like that. So like placing these action stones here, or how to draw these the Tryon tiles here. Basically everything has been drawn at random. I think this is important as I don't want to cheat for any player and do it a little bit better for the other one. So I really decided, okay, let's go for the random decision here. So you see every player got a Tryon here. Then there is these stones, action stones. This is a Mancala-like mechanism I explain also in a second. Then there are these Tryon plates here, tokens here, which provide you some benefits like victory points or yeah, having extra actions, for example. Every player has drawn 3 of these commodity cards, also at random, and at random every player starts off with a bonus tile here basically. This bonus tile is pretty important as it gives you really some good direction on how to start the game, on what to concentrate, at least at the very start of the game. Later on there will be additional bonus tiles. I show them to you also in a second. But it's really good starting point so that you can go, okay, I have this bonus card right now in my hand. This game gives me some extra victory points by the end of the game. So this is a way on how to concentrate on your very first moves in Tryon. This is the player board for the blue player. Also everything has been drawn at random, like the action stones here. This is the bonus tile for bonus tile for the blue player. And here are his 3 commodity cards. Also I've drawn the Tryon tiles at random. So that's basically the same. So this will be the starting condition for each player. On the top right you see the worker tiles or worker tokens that you can use. later on. And now let's have a look at the game board and the single component that you can find here. The lower part of the game shows for once the time track with a time marker here, and I use the time track for a two-player game here. You see there is a time track for a three-player game and so forth for a four-player game. This also takes only a little bit longer. These are the demand tokens that show you later on within the game in which round of each quarter you are. So basically Tryon is placed in quarters. Let me show these to you. So these are the quarter tiles. Let me just go there, as you can see that. So we are starting, of course, in the first quarter of it. And when the fourth quarter is over, then the game ends. And again, it's a Euro-style game in the end, so whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game wins it, of course. Let's get back to the time track here and see how this works. Every time a player is going to do some action on his player board, I show that to you, and this is also the Mancala mechanism, the time track will be moved. So for example, if you take two of these action stones from the player board and do your select your action that you're going to do, then you have to move the time track according to the amount of action stones so you have been using. In the first turn you can only have two, because in each of the little spaces are two stones. So when you take these two stones, the action stone is moved two spaces. Whenever this time stone or time marker enters or crosses this starting spot here, one game round is over, and then we would flip a demand token here to reflect, okay, hey, we finished a game round. When there are three demand tokens already open, then later on in the game, I will put them here. And again, this time track will, or the time marker will cross the starting spot here. Then the quarter is ending, and there are some special conditions are going to happen. The same goes for the game round, but this is end of the game round is not that drastic. But at the end of each quarter, you have to feed or you have to fulfill the demands of your people and so on, and several other things to do. You have to re-equip the forum and the build spots and so on, but I will show that to you later. These two here show for once the starting player condition. It's very important of the order of this stack here. So the player who's at the bottom starts the game, but the player on top of everyone else can decide on ties later on in the Senate actions here. But this is also something I will explain in the course of the game. This is pretty simple. This is the victory track, and of course here the order does not really matter. These two tiles show the bonus tiles for each quarter. They are then being given to the player who has the most votes from the Senate track, as you can see here, but this is also something I explain later, though this again is a great way to gain additional victory points for the end of the game here. These are the 6 stacks for the Trajan tiles, and each of those provide an additional different bonus. For example, these are worth for later on for satisfying the demands of the people. This gives you some victory points, as you can see. This is something where you can place a worker on the worker space there. I show that to you in a second. The top right is for putting a soldier to the camp, or the military camp later on. This is something that you can do a trade action on the harbor, or like on the harbor for commodity cards. And this one gives you a bonus action tile, basically, which you can use later on to double the amount of actions you can do within for a special action. This is the forum. This is pretty easy, so it shows you special benefits like votes for the Senate, or special actions that you're going to use, or resources to satisfy the demands, or bonus token, and they can be chosen within each action. This shows the seaport. This is also a great way to gain victory points, or especially the commodities for later use of victory points. And these ships here show also some additional bonus or victory point conditions, which I will explain later when we do that appropriate action. This is reflects the construction action, where you can build your domus and gain victory points, and also for special combinations you gain an additional victory points later on. Also a great way to win the game. And last but not least, this is the military camp, where you can transform your workers into soldiers and then later on send them here to one of these provinces to gain victory points and the appropriate forum tile for additional bonuses for whatever, satisfying the demands of the people and so on. These were more or less all the spots or the whole game board. I think I will now go into more detail in explaining the possible actions on each of these locations on the game board, but I really will make it fast, and then we can really get started right away. Let's start with the Harbour Action. So basically what you can do or the Seaport Action here, one, you can do draw 2 cards from the closed discard pile. 1, 2. This would be one option. The other option would be to take either one card of one of these 2 open stacks of cards. In this case they are showing both the same, but still it might be useful for that one. Then you will be allowed to play 1 or 2 cards from your hand to your player's display. So 1 and 2, and afterwards you are allowed to play to draw 1 or 2 cards from the hidden redraw pile, basically. Additionally, you could go for some victory points by sending or shipping these commodities to a let's say foreign harbor or so. Then you would be taking either one, so each of these ships show different winning conditions. This special ship shows for 1 card you gain 2 victory points. For 2 cards that show different types you gain 4 points. For 3 cards you gain 6 points. So in this case we would place 2 different commodities. We would gain 4 victory points, and then additionally we would flip over the ship because we already fulfilled or we already shipped 1 commodity section. So every player that will be later on in the game would get a reduced amount of victory points later on. In this special case, or when you play this option in the Seaport Actions, you are not allowed to redraw cards from either of these piles. Next would be the forum action. This is pretty simple, so whenever you decide to go for a forum action, you just take 1 tile from this offer here from the forum and place it onto your player board for later usage. This would be the military action, so there are also several options you can take. For once, you would be allowed to train another recruit. This is pretty simple. You take one of your workers from your player board, place it to the military camp, and now this legionnaire, this worker is now a legionnaire for until the end of the game. This would be one option. An additional option would be to move your leader, represented by the bigger worker here or by the bigger figure here, and you can move that to any adjacent province basically. So this would be adjacent, this is reflected by the green line, this would be adjacent, and this would be adjacent. When entering or when placing that leader to one of the provinces, you would be allowed to gain the forum tile that's here printed, or that's laid out here on the board. An additional action would be to move a legionnaire from their camp to the spot where the current leader is. And this is pretty important because this is the way to gain the victory points. Keep in mind, a province can only hold 1 legionnaire of a color, so this would be okay, this would be not okay. I mentioned that the first legionnaire that comes to a province gains these 3 victory points. There is a possibility that another legionnaire could enter this province, for example, if this guy would come here, the leader here. But when you place the legionnaire to this province, you gain -3 victory points for each other legionnaire that is already on the board here. In this case, the blue player would gain 0 victory points because 3 minus 3 is 0. Another situation would be here if this would be the current scenario, and let's say the blue player would now come here, then the first or the red player who would be here already would have gained 6 victory points, but the blue player then would gain 3 victory points. There's no way to move legionnaires from province to province, so once they are placed in a province they have to stay there. So every time when you want to place a new legionnaire on a province, you have to do that from your base camp. So it's pretty important to restock your military camp as soon as possible to have the soldiers available. Then there is the Tryon action. This is also pretty simple. So the player chooses the top tile of a stack here and places it on his own player board, and the position on where to place it on the player board is presented, let me scroll over a little bit, is represented by where this basically block is. Let me check. The Arc of Tryon, of course, where the Arc of Tryon is here. So whenever we would draw a token here, we would place the Tryon tile here, and then the Arc of Tryon goes to the next free spot on the player board where there is no Tryon tile. And then later on you can try to resolve these Tryon tiles. Next would be the Senate action. This is also relatively simple. So whenever you are going for a Senate action, you take your token independent of each position, advance this 1 space, gain the amount of victory points, and that's more or less it. Whenever you are already on this spot here, and to be honest, this is not very likely, or it does not happen too often, of course depends on your playing style, then you're not allowed to go any further. This will be your last position, but I think until then you would really have gathered already many victory points. And at the end of each quarter, then the player with the most votes, and this would be reflected by the numbers here, would be consul, and the consul would then decide on which of these bonus tokens or tiles he's going to take, and he would choose one, and then the second player or the player with the second most votes could then go for the other bonus tile, but would need to use the silver side of it. So still gain some bonus actions, but way less than the first player. This would be the construction action, and there are also several options. So for once you can turn one of your little tokens here or your workers and dedicate or train him to be a worker. Like the soldier or the legionnaire, this will always be a worker until the end of the game. So there's no way to transform this worker later on back to a legionnaire. The second action would be to place a worker that's already here on this camp here, on the worker camp here, and place it on any of these construction tiles here. As long as this would be your first worker, you would place that. So like here. If you would then go in the next turn and also would decide to go for a construction action and would want to place one worker in that in the grid here, then you have to place him adjacent to any existing worker here. So this would be adjacent, so horizontally or vertically. Diagonally would not be adjacent. When placing your worker on a on a field where there's still a tile, you are allowed to take that tile, gain the appropriate amount of victory points, in this case 3, and then you can place this tile on your player board. Whenever you place your first tile on one of these spaces where or the appropriate spaces, like here, like the windows here, you gain immediately an extra action, and this extra action is reflected by this little icon here. So in this case, when placing a window, you would be allowed to do an instant military action. Remember, this really has to be instant. You are allowed to place your worker on the same spot as a foreign player or as another player, but in this case you wouldn't get any bonus tile, but it could still be valuable, as you might then be able to place your worker then adjacent to this one. Of course, in this case, when you place your first worker on a field, this is not very interesting, but this might come in handy later on when going for a special tile, because you also get additional bonuses later on through bonus cards when having the right amount of these construction tiles. After you have performed one of your actions, and this was apparently the last one, you can then check if you would be allowed to do accomplish the Tryon tile, more or less. So you see there's these Tryon tiles, and they reflect a special the special color combination in how to fulfill or to accomplish this Tryon tile. So whenever, for example, I will change that a little bit. I will exchange that correctly. So for example, in this special scenario, the red player would take his first turn, so he would get 1 and 2. So for once he would end his movement for the Mancala tile on this spot. So, and then you see, hey, I ended this spot, so for once I have to do a Senate action. I explained that to you already. And then I would do my Senate action accordingly, and then I can check if I could accomplish a Tryon tile. In this case I could that, because there are 2 yellow tokens in this space here, and this appropriate Tryon tile shows also this same combination. So in this case I would be allowed to gain 9 victory points, because this reflected here, and then I would remove this Tryon tile completely out of the game, and in order to refill that later on, I would need to do appropriate Tryon action. This is basically the same for all the other tiles. So for this one would be, for example, I would be allowed to place 2 workers to the military camp, and for additionally I would gain 2 victory points, but of course I would need an orange and a blue tile in this field here. So let me just put that back. I think it was like this. So most important is that I don't start with the 2 yellow tiles here. And that's also the reason why you have to place the color or the action stones before you can actually draw your Tryon tiles. Now I was a bit ahead of myself here or of the game, and I already more or less implicitly explained how the selection for the action is moving. So this is pretty easy, as I showed to you. So you would decide on one of these spaces here. You would take the all stones that are reflected here and move them, put them clockwise on the appropriate spaces here. And wherever you would place your last stone, this action you would have to fulfill and have to do. It's up to you on how to decide on which stone you would place on which space. So you could also go in that direction or whenever else. So this is a very great way to plan your actions accordingly, and also on how to fulfill or try to fulfill the Tryon tiles here. Let me explain a little bit more about the other slots that you are seeing here. For once, as you can see, there are these action spots here, and these are tiles more or less you can get from the extra tiles spot from the forum. So whenever you do a forum action and would go, for example, for this Tryon action, then later on, if you would do a Tryon action like here, for example, then you could spend this token. Really, you have to spend it. Oops. You have to spend it, and then you would be allowed to redo that action one more time. So you would then have 2 Tryon action during this turn. There are also later on possibilities to gain a +2 token, and then you would be allowed to do the same action 3 times basically when you would spend this token. In this case you would only lose this token, but you could still keep the +2 token here. So this is something where you can, this is something which you have more or less until the end of the game, this bonus. This is the space where you can keep your demand tokens for later on, for the end of the quarter actually. This is something where you can place the one-time tiles. This is something that you can gain from the forum, for example, or from a province. So for example, if you would have this one here, then you would fulfill one demand in this case. But remember, after each quarter there are always 3 demands that you have to fulfill. This might be also twice this gladiator symbol, for example, or this religion demand here. So there's a great way to fulfill this more or less later on, and this is through the Tryon tiles, and this is something, whenever you fulfill this Tryon tile, you would place it on this spot here, and this gives you until the end of the turn fulfills 1 demand for bread. But also keep in mind, if there would be 2 demands for bread, then this would only help you in resolving one of those. But still a great way to have some reserve for later on in the game. Then one last position shows this one here, and this is more or less a place where you can keep your wildcard tiles. The wildcard cards are also being drawn from the forum or from the provinces, and yeah, give you some special bonuses for each of those. For example, this is something where you can place a wildcard for a double token from what I showed you before. This would allow you to double any action that you are going to go for, but of course also you would need to discard this one then. This would is a wildcard for a resource that you can fill any demand here. This is a wildcard for a commodity, and this would be a wildcard for later on for for resolving these construction tiles. So I think that's definitely it in respect to the preparations. So I will put this together, and I think then in the next episode we really can go on with the gameplay. I'm really looking forward to it. Hope to see you soon, and yeah, stay with me when I'm playing through this 2-player variant of Tryon.